What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of the Just Win Baby podcast brought to you by my name, Liam, Picks Fights, and our co-host each and every week on the show, Just Win Baby. Rich is back in the house. And guys, last week was not my week. Our man Rich keeps the train rolling. So overall, it's been a great year for the two of us, but it's Rich's day of celebration. You did well on last week's card, brother. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good man. Yeah, I did do well. Bet on Leon. Got that dog money on him again. And a bunch of other shit. So yeah, it's like 9 UFC events unbeaten at the moment. So trying to keep the train rolling, man, this week.
Love it, man. 5-1 for me. But now we're back to some fighters I've been profitable on. I knew going into last week, I was like, this is an uphill battle. Haven't made money historically betting these fighters except for some notable exceptions like Leon. Delivered once again, proved that Marty was in fact fake newsman that weekend. But as we go on to this week, we got 13 great fights, a lot of betting opportunities that I'm looking at this week compared to last week where, I picked my spots. It didn't end up going my way. That Fazia fight was the decider for me. So didn't go my way, cost me the winning night. No sweat there. But now we got 13 more opportunities. So we'll start at 135 pounds with Tamires Vidal taking on Hailey Cowan. And last I checked, they had not opened up full props at U.S. domestics for this fight. That's not atypical when you're looking at fights, that are the first fight of the night. Typically not a prelim that will attract a ton of volume. But in this case, you got Hailey Cowan coming in off the Contender Series. Will have some name value, some notoriety for that reason. I think she might be a popular play, but she's also a Texas native. She looks the part. She might just get some favorable judging as a result of that. The crowd might be on her side, for example. Again, another local fighter. But Tamires Vidal, on the other hand, what does she bring to the table? I think in the early going before she tires out, she's aggressive with her striking. We saw in her last fight. The finishing sequence was basically like 2 jumping knees in a row. She's grabbing a hold of the head, trying to come up there with knees, trying to land impactful, explosive strikes. And I don't think Hailey Cowan's anything to write home about. So not a fighter I'd be looking to bet at chalk. Many times. I'm probably not going to bet on this fight, but I do think ultimately Hailey Cowan, if she does not get finished in the early going here, if she does not get hurt with those strikes, or she's not getting, submitted by putting her head in a dumb position, which she's done before, admittedly. And I think that at the 7-1 number that opened up, I understand why sharp players came in and took the shot. I happen to know who took that shot and moved the number to plus 550, and I respect their opinion. So I think that Tamires Vidal has a chance to win this fight by finish in the early going, but I don't think she has the same level of physical fitness. I don't think that she's as strong as Hailey Cowan. I don't think that she has the cardio necessarily either. You saw her quit against Perez on the regional scene. We did the whole DQ deal there, but overall, I thought that she had some red flags coming into the UFC. Just because she got the win in her last fight, people shouldn't necessarily forget that. So just because you want to fade Hailey Cowan, which I thought I was going to do when she was fighting Perez, I don't know that this is necessarily the spot. So for me, I'm probably going to pass on this fight. I think Hailey Cowan's going to grease out a split decision, let's say, in Texas. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, I was probably going to bet Perez against Cowan. I thought Perez had what was needed to beat Cowan. But I don't think Vidal's got it, man. She's got some sub upside, but it's mainly like these leg locks she's going for. And she's got to get it to the ground first, which I don't think she's going to be able to do. She's a bit flat-footed, Vidal. And like you say, just because she TKO'd Ramona Pascal doesn't mean she's anything to write home about. She's not athletic. She hasn't got any footwork. She does gas in her fights. And yeah, if you got that early money on Cowan, that plus 190 or whatever it was, then well done to you. But at the current line, I can't bet either of these because I don't trust either of them. So it's going to be a pass. But yeah, if I had to pick one, I'd say Cowan probably wins the decision. She stays out of the submission threats. And yeah, gets a decision, but no bet from me. Just a shit show of a fight, man.
And the only reason that I was tempted to bet the Vidal by subline is because I bet that other girl who I didn't think was very good on the Contender Series, Lecce. I bet Lecce by sub, right? So I was willing to take a shot with somebody who I thought was a bit of a fugazi. because I thought Cowan made some mistakes, but in her last fight was able to go out there, produce for the full 15 minutes. You know that the UFC would prefer if she wins this fight. So those kind of things are enough to keep me off of this one. But for me, Hailey Cowan's the side, not enough to get involved with the bet. Shout out to the early bettors who mushed this line to beyond belief. Next up, Vinicius, Salvador, and Victor Altamirano. And in this fight, I think we're looking at an honest pick'em here. Best available price on the Altamirano side is plus 105. Vinicius, Salvador, best available minus 110. So you're looking at a virtual pick'em here. Altamirano, maybe the slight underdog if you had to choose one. And Vinicius, Salvador, he's coming in with a nice finish on Contender Series, but don't really rate the competition there from the Contender Series bout. Shannon Rich been finished in both of his Zuffa appearances, let's say. But I do think that Salvador has some danger for the weight class. He throws some power. And I actually bet him ITD and by sub against Shannon Ross because I thought he was going to hurt him and find the sub finish. Believe he's from the Hebos family gym. And, Amanda Hebos is a very talented grappler. I think that her father is very legit. I think that the training that they do is good. But I think overall the cardio is a problem for Salvador. He's kind of one of these longer, lanky guys in the division that I think can get hurt with shots to the body. He's been KO'd and finished before. So I think that, Sean makes a good point. Salvador really hasn't fought anybody very good. He's been fighting, pretty soft quality of competition on the regional scene, but you also have to try and evaluate talent and see, does he offer any upside? I think he does have power in his hands. I think he can hurt people. But do I think that that's enough necessarily to favor him here against Altamirano? No, I don't. I think Altamirano is the more proven guy against UFC level fighters. He's fought for the full 15 minutes a few more times as well, a little bit more seasoned. So I prefer the Altamirano side here. I also think this fight's going to go under 2.5. I just think that the way that Salvador fights, he kind of puts himself in constant danger, looking to attack, looking to finish, and that could be a recipe for disaster. But it's also his opportunity. So I think that, maybe in under 2.5 rounds here, I prefer Altamirano as a side. What do you think, Rich? Also, I think Altamirano by KO is a little too wide. That's the last thing I'll say. It was like plus 700. Salvador is just like constantly with his hands at his sides, looking to wade into the pocket and throw. So I just think that that's a little bit of a risky line there because Altamirano is going to be swinging back with him.
Yeah, I'm same. I like Altamirano in this fight. The competition for Salvador is very low. 0-0 fighters outside of that Shannon Ross fight on Dana White Contender Series. And we've seen what Shannon Ross is about. He's a complete bum. And Salvador couldn't even put him out. He was dropping him constantly. But it was only the second round when he caught him. So I don't even put too much stock into Salvador's KO ability. It's hard to gauge when he's been fighting 0-0 fighters in Brazil. And on Altamirano, on his side, I like him, man. I like his intelligence. I watched some interviews, heard him chatting about, the fight game and, what he brings to the table. And he seems highly intelligent to me. Like his last fight, the one that was in Salt Lake City, he was talking about how he wanted to put a show on for the fans. It was like the first time they'd been there or been there in a while. And he wanted to come out aggressive and, show up for the fans and stuff. So I liked to hear that from him. And his game's not bad. I just like it's his lack of power. That's the only thing that concerns me. But everything else is half decent, man. Good cardio, good volume, which kind of makes up for the power. And I think he can put Salvador out here after round one, just weather the early storm. And then I think it's going to be all Altamirano. Salvador doesn't push the wrestling, doesn't push the takedowns. Barely kicks. He just wants to unload with that left hand. So Altamirano, weather the first round and then put it on him, man. And that's what I expect to happen.
I like where your head is at overall. I think that we largely agree on this fight. Some notes that I had in my A-side report for the first fight and for this fight. Cowan is a Texas fighter. I think I mentioned that in the breakdown, but Vidal, 7 years younger. Both of them are pretty green overall, less than 10 pro fights. So that's why laying heavy chalk in either direction there doesn't make a lot of sense. For this fight, the social media A side is actually Salvador. He comes in here, probably 5x the social media, but Altamirano, local Tex-Mex fighter. He's going to get the support of the local crowd. He is going to be 6 years older older in this contest, but again, he's fought the better quality of competition. So arguments can be made for both guys, but I think that skill for skill probably favor the Altamirano side here, a little bit more seasoned in the UFC as well. So for those reasons, taking Altamirano and moving along to the next fight at 155 pounds, where we've got Manuel Torres taking on Trey Ogden. And this is a fight where we've seen heavy line movement. And I know that you've got a strong opinion on this one. You tweeted it out. So without further ado, my man Rich, take it away.
Yeah, Torres is the side for me, and that's a bet at minus 150. I think he was at one point. I haven't looked at the line too recently to see where it's at now. But yeah, some big line movement on that one. Yeah, you can get him for minus 140 still. So I think that's good value, man. I don't like Ogden. I didn't like him against Jordan Levitt. I didn't like what I saw. He was fully gassed in round 3. He's supposed to be a jiu-jitsu guy, and from what I can see, he's nothing amazing there either. He hasn't really got any hands. So yeah, I'd say he's sub or bust in this position. And if he gets the fight to the ground, he could obviously hit that sub. But that's the big X factor in this fight. I don't think he can get it to the ground against Torres. I think Torres is fully aware of what he can and can't do. I think he knows he lacks the ground game, and that's why when he's punching, he doesn't overextend. You know, he doesn't get too wild. Everything's crisp and short. Yeah, I think he knows his takedown and his ground game is bad. He's fully on steroids. Everyone go check out his Instagram and tell me I'm wrong. Torres is fully on the supplements, in my opinion. So that's just going to make it harder for Trey. And yeah, I expect Torres to find a knockout round 2 or 3. But I'm going to be wary of that because I think he can even catch Ogden in a guillotine when he goes for these takedowns. He's hit one already, Torres, a guillotine on the regional circuit. And Ogden himself, like I said, he's supposed to be a BJJ guy, but he's been subbed a handful of times, twice by Thomas Guilford. So yeah, even the sub could be on there. But yeah, Torres is the side. And I think if you can get that minus 140, it's great value, man.
Yeah, and I'm just looking right now at the Tapology, and it says there's a 1-inch reach advantage on the side of Manuel Torres. Instinctually, it just feels like it'll be a little bit longer than that. He's got long arms, and he's very good at locking up the guillotine choke. You know, if there's one move that I feel like I know my way around, it's a guillotine choke. He's very solid in that position, and that's where Trey Ogden just has made some fundamental errors in MMA. But you look at the guy, he's outside the organization. He's winning a bunch of like IBJJF opens in Dallas and stuff like that at the black belt level. So the guy's no slouch in grappling. I just think that when you introduce the strikes, when you introduce the threat of danger, maybe that makes him make some more questionable decisions in the octagon. So for me, I'm curious to see how low this number will go. You know, there's a lot of Trey Ogden love that's come in, and I get it. You know, I think that if there's one thing that we know about the market, they love a grappler, right? They love somebody that could go out there and push that kind of pace, take somebody down, especially a wrestler grappler archetype. But I think that in Ogden, I'm not sure that he's going to be able to press that wrestling and grappling pace enough. I think he could lose a decision here, waiting on the outside, kind of like he did in the Levitt fight. You know, just not enough engagement in that fight for him to win. So I think that those are some of the problems on the Ogden side, especially now that the numbers come down considerably. Couldn't look that way. Would prefer the Torres side here. I'm seeing the KO as high as plus 275, which I think is an interesting number. But again, it's like, is it bait? You know, are they hanging this number so high because he's going to get the sub? And the sub feels oddly low. When you have a purple belt taking on a black belt and they're the same price to win by sub, and you've got Torres at like plus 3XX to win by sub, that's a little bit alarming to me. That feels very strong. So I would probably be looking at Torres money line or Torres ITD if I was really expecting him to finish. But I don't want to get too cute. That was a kind of lesson from last week for me. Is I kind of tried to pick my spots and pick a couple interesting props and stuff. And oftentimes that works for me. But if I like a money line, I just want to play the money line and get the value that's there. So probably going to be looking towards Torres in this fight or passing entirely. But next up, we've got a fight between CJ Vergara, San Antonio's own stand-up, taking on Daniel Da Silva, 0-3 in the organization, fighting out his contract here, looking for lucky win in that fourth fight. Vergara, I bet a huge amount against him when he was fighting the Tatsuro Tyrers of the division, prospects that I rate, people on the come up, missed weight for that fight as well, a little bit of unprofessionalism. But when you listen to him talking about this fight, he sounds like he's been much more prepared, much more professional in the lead up to the fight, which I think is to his benefit. And I think for De Silva, it's kind of until I see otherwise, I can't really trust the guy. It's like after you flunk out on me a couple of times, I can't keep trusting you to go out there and get the win. And I had him against Jeff Molina, I think, for a small bet. That was the only time I think I bet him in the UFC. And I was like, wow, this guy just doesn't have the cardio to go the full 15. And in a weight class like this, like flyweight, so hard. If you can't go for the full 15 minutes to expect to win fights, because a lot of these guys push an insane pace. And I think that Vergara, what I thought was like a money punch for Tyra is that he's so good in the grappling, and Vergara's grappling is nothing really to write home about. That's the area he's got to continue to improve. But he's got a weird body. He's not too easy to get a hold of. He's not too easy to control. The only guys that have done it have been really long and lanky, and they got a hold of him in the pretty early going of the fight. I think the longer the fight goes, the more it favors Vergara, obviously. But I also think Vergara's live in the early going. He's a dangerous guy who comes out pretty aggressive and pretty confident. He's throwing shots to the body. He's trying to get in there and hit you and hurt you. I think De Silva's best chance to win this fight is by sub in round 1, right? So I think if he wins this fight, he's going to take this guy down, take his back, and choke him. Because when he's live and fresh, it's in the early going. He's attacking. He's coming out aggressive. And I think that we've seen Vergara get steamrolled like that once before, right? It was up a weight class, though. It was at 135. It was against these bigger guys. So for me, I don't know exactly what to make of this fight. I just think that the under 2.5 is very solid here. For De Silva, it's been under 2.5, has been a trend that's just been going, money. But then they moved it to the 1.5. And now everybody's coming in at the juiced 1.5. And I'm like, oh, this is when stuff normally starts to go sideways. So Vergara in the second half of round 2 is going to make a lot of people puke in their hands if that happens. But I just think Vergara is eventually going to get this done. San Antonio zone. I think they're going to raise their native son, and he's going to get the win. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, I think if you're playing the under 1.5, you definitely got to be careful. De Silva losing, I think, will be because he's dying, gassing, not anything that Vergara is really doing. I don't really like Vergara, but, he's the lesser of two evils in this fight. If I was going to play De Silva, I would pick the submission, like you say. I think he's got some, good arm bars and triangles off his back. I can see Vergara just taking him down stupidly and being a bit lazy and getting caught in one of those. But outside of that, we've seen from De Silva, you can't trust him with your money. That gas tank, the IQ, it's just too low, man. All the spinning shit he's doing on the feet, you don't want to see. So yeah, I guess you take Vergara, but at the chalk price, I'd be wary, man. I think De Silva definitely could hit a submission round 1. So yeah, just a pass fight from me. Stay away from it. There's plenty of other bets to be had, man.
Couldn't agree more, and especially at the big chalk price. You see a guy go from being an underdog in almost every outing to being a big favorite. It's a little bit questionable, and we'll talk about that in some fights later down the stretch as well. But just something you want to watch is public perception changes over time, right? What have you done for me lately? You have a great last fight. It could change the market's perception completely. So you want to take these unbiased, objective data points. What was the closing line the last couple times this guy fought? That'll tell you a good story oftentimes about where they're at. And for Daniel De Silva, he's basically an underdog every time. And it's because he doesn't really have the cardio to go the full 15 minutes. And this is his fourth and final opportunity. If he doesn't get the job done here, I think he's getting his walking papers, and he's going to have to make it work on the regional scene. So next up, we've got a 170-pound clash between another Texas fighter, Trevin Giles. We'll see if they like the popo in San Antonio. But Trevin Giles, police officer, local, going to be taking on Preston Parsons. And, this is an interesting fight for me because, bad read, bad bet. One of the worst I've ever made was on Evan Elder against Preston Parsons. I was like, man, this guy came in, he got absolutely flatlined by Daniel Rodriguez. Just didn't look like he had much to offer there, What I liked about him was that he was gritty and tough. He got hit, he got dropped, he got back up, he kept trying to swing at him, landed a couple decent shots. But overall, he just seemed way under-skilled to fight somebody like D-Rod. He was getting overwhelmed with all the strikes early. And I think that in this kind of fight, Trevin Giles is just more seasoned and skilled than Preston Parsons, especially on the feet. The problem that I have with Giles is sometimes his work rate isn't there. His third rounds haven't always been very impressive. He's gassed out a little bit. He's gotten finished, but I think this is a must-win fight for Trevin Giles. I think he needs to have this one for his career in order to keep it moving forward. And you just look at the quality of wins. There's a huge gulf between these two guys. Trevin Giles at his best, he's beating very talented, sound fighters from the LFA scene to the UFC. And then you look at Preston Parsons, and he's not really fighting anybody of note. And when he did, he got blown out of the water, and then he fought a lightweight, and he didn't get the finish. Whereas Nazim Sadikov, down 2 rounds, gets the finish against Evan Elder. So just some things that are kind of red flags for me on the Parsons side. He also trains at his own gym, something I don't love. But skill for skill, Parsons' path to winning this fight is just to be a blanket, to get on top, to try and wear out Trevin Giles, stay on top of him and control the wrists. I think he's got an awkward body type. That's his best, path, is to grab a hold of these takedowns. But I just think Trevin Giles, he's got a dangerous guillotine. He's got pretty decent, reactions, and his strikes are hard to deal with. So I think Officer Giles might be back in business this week. But the other thing is, me and you talked about this earlier in the week, Texas fighters, just because you're from Texas doesn't mean that that's always a good thing. They haven't always won at a higher rate historically. So I don't think that he's necessarily going to get favorable judging. I think that the judging is all over the place in Texas. And I do think this fight is more often than not going to hit the scorecards, unless somebody gasses out and it's a later round finish. What do you think?
Yeah, good point, man. All the bullshit we got last week with the judges, so then we end up in Texas the week after. You can't write that stuff, man. So yeah, we'll see how the judging goes on Saturday. But yeah, I think it's lined correctly, this fight. I think it's a hard one to call. I think Parsons definitely could win this fight with, time on top. He's obviously going to look for the takedowns. One thing I don't like about him is out of his 16 fights, 12 of them he's won in the distance in round 1, which doesn't tell me much. And then the one fight that he did get extended, the Evan Elder fight against a guy who was coming up a weight class, he gassed in the 3rd round and got taken down himself. So they're not good looks for me. I don't like that. Giles does have some good BJJ on him himself. Submitted Brendan Allen back in the day. So yeah, it's a tough one to call, man. I think if I had to choose though, I'd lean Giles, but nothing convincingly. It's like Parsons fought Daniel Rodriguez. You can't blame him for that L. On fight night, Rodriguez is about 200 pounds. It's hard to take him down. And then Evan Elder, he had his way with him. He just couldn't find the submission and gas date. So yeah, I'd lean Giles. I think he's got the BJJ to negate whatever Parsons is bringing. And then on the feet, I definitely think Giles has got the better hands. I do think Parsons is pure BJJ. All he wants is that takedown and that sub. So if he can't get it, I worry for him. I don't want to have my money on someone like that who can't get their sub in the 1st round. So yeah, I'd lean Giles, but I'd just like a better number on it to bet it, to be fair.
I agree with you. And just in terms of the intangibles here, Giles from Houston, Texas, like I mentioned, he's also going to be 1 inch taller. He's going to have a 2-inch reach advantage. He's 3 years older, but he's got the quality of competition edge in a pretty big way here. So it's a fascinating fight. One of the things that I wanted to mention is just a better matched card in terms of the lines as well. Not a ton of huge chalked out -4, 5, 600 favorites. A lot more closely lined fights. And this is one of them where you can make a credible case for both guys, but I just lean on that experience of Giles shining through here a little bit. I think he's the more educated fighter on the feet where the fight starts. And I think that if he creates enough damage with the jab early, we might not see as clean a performance from Preston Parsons down the stretch, where we already saw him gas when everything was kind of going well against Evan Elder. I think that against Trevin Giles, he's going to create enough resistance that maybe he gives that vet lesson that he got a couple times in the UFC from Gerald Mearshart and company. But I think that I like Trevin Giles to get this done late. Next up, folks, we've got Steven Ocho Peterson taking on Lucas Alexander. And this is a fight that, my gut instinct said Lucas Alexander's the side here as an underdog. And the more I looked into it, the more I said to myself, I was like, is this guy really going to get submitted by Steven Peterson? Which I think is a possibility here. I think the more dynamic athlete is Lucas Alexander. But I think that the more skilled fighter is Steven Peterson. He's been in there with better guys. He's been pretty tested at this point in his career. And he's not very athletic, but he makes it a fight with almost everybody. And he almost always is offering takedowns against the fence. He's trying to bring some pressure. I think if he does that here, he could look really successful. But if he keeps this fight on the feet, I do think that he is a candidate to get knocked out here because Lucas Alexander, he doesn't have the greatest striking, but he does commit to his 1-2. He looks like the much faster guy to me on the feet. I think he's a little more bouncy, and I think he's got the room to improve fight over fight in a big way. He's training at Fusion XL. He trains with a bunch of guys that are good grapplers. So, a lot of his footage is from earlier on in his career. And the guy basically came from a regional scene where he wasn't doing very well. And he said, like, I had to make a make or break in my career where I decided I'm coming to the States and I'm going to try and get, improve my skills. Is that enough? Has he done enough to win this fight here? I'm not sure, but I also don't feel comfortable laying the chalk on Steven Peterson. So I think I'd sooner pass. If I was on the Peterson side, I'd probably just take Peterson by sub. I think that's his cleanest path to victory. I think he can grind his way out to a decision here. But I think that Lucas Alexander is going to remain live if this fight gets extended, just because, I think Peterson might gas himself out trying to take him down. He's a little bit of a bigger guy. Yeah, I don't have the strongest opinion here, but I went from thinking Lucas Alexander, is the click at plus 140 to maybe I'll just pass on this. What do you think, Rich?
I think you're too kind, man. I think Alexander's a complete bum, probably the worst on the roster, to be honest. His record is disgusting. I don't know why he's in the UFC. He ain't Dana White's contended series or anything like that. He fights Jacob Kilburn, who's not that great himself, in Anthony Pettis' show. And Kilburn gets injured. So, Alex gets a win. And now he's in the UFC. I don't rate him at all. He's got no grappling. Yeah, he's fighting at Fusion XL with some half-decent people. But yeah, I don't like him at all, man. I don't like his game. I've just realized that Peterson, as you were saying, that Peterson's minus 140. Where's that? Minus 144. If I can get that price, that's a bet all day. I think that's great value on Peterson. I think he's likely going to sub this guy. If he doesn't, Peterson should get subbed from the UFC, kicked out from the UFC, because this is a layup if I've ever seen one. So yeah, I'm fully on the Peterson side here, and I'll be making a bet now. I've seen that the line's that good. Yeah,
I think Brito would also absolutely rock Peterson. That's my opinion, but I think that that's a really tough first assignment. I'd be curious to see how he does in the second fight out, but maybe I am being too kind to our guy Lucas Alexander. He's got some intangibles. He's a younger guy, 3-inch reach advantage here. But I do tend to agree that skills more often than not win fights, and Steven Peterson is the more skilled fighter here. Also, I believe from Texas, training out of Fortis MMA, so could be a potential narrative play there. Similar social media numbers. Peterson's 5 years older, so not too egregious of an age difference here either. Next up, folks, we are moving to the featherweight division once again. Actually, we got Daniel Pineda taking on Tucker Lutz. And I think that we disagree on this one as well, because, I think Tucker Lutz, he's not somebody that you're writing about. It's like the next up-and-coming 145 or who's going to unthrone Alexander Volkanovski. But I just think he's a pretty solid enough up-and-coming guy. He's not going to blow your hair back in any one category, but he's fairly durable, can stay after it in the wrestling and grappling for the full 15 minutes. And I think that, when he's engaging in close, he's trying to throw meaningful strikes. He's trying to hurt people. He's trying to land leg kicks. So I think that he's trying to win fights. He's trying to manage rounds and get on top of people. I think Daniel Pineda is trying to get fight of the night. I think he's trying to get $50,000. I don't think he is even trying to win in half of these fights. You look at the Cub Swanson fight in the interviews that he did after the fact. He's like saying to Cub, he's like, yeah, let's get 50,000, man. Let's get 50,000. And he's just standing in the pocket swinging with him to basically saying, I don't care if I get knocked out. I want 50 grand, so I'll fight like an idiot. And if that's your preposition going in, then you have to be the underdog. But that being said, am I going to go lay minus 300 on Tucker Lutz? No, because I don't think he's going to win this fight at a 75% clip. I just think he's more likely to win the fight. So I don't really like the Pineda side here at 37 years of age. He's the kind of guy I could see coming in here and just losing and getting finished pretty early. I don't know what version of him we're going to see. I do think that I believe you made a point on Half the Battle with Dan. Shout out to Dan from Half the Battle. Great show that you guys did there as well. But when he was talking about this fight, or I think you mentioned it. I can't even remember, but either way, it was Pineda might just juice up for this fight and let it be a retirement fight where he rides off to the sunset and tests positive. But I think that, we saw diminished versions of Pineda in the last couple of fights. I thought that the cardio was the biggest fall off of all. When you talk about Chael Sonnen does interviews where he says the king of all the PEDs is EPO. It's what everybody wants to be on, so you don't get tired. So you're not worried about getting tired. And I think that that's the biggest problem for him here is Lutz is just consistent to fight for the 15. I don't think that he's going to break in this fight unless Pineda knocks him cold or, just takes him to the ground and subs him. But I don't see either of those happening at a very high clip. I don't think Pineda is the kind of guy who's going to shoot takedowns to try and sub him. Honestly, I think he's more often going to come out here and try and brawl it out for the Texas crowd. And I think he might get knocked into bits. So I like Tucker Lutz, probably round 2 or round 3 by knockout. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, it's annoying, man. You're probably right. Pineda probably just come out full retard and throw the kitchen sink. And if you're playing Pineda, you play him in the distance here for sure. I don't think he's going to do anything different than his last couple of fights. I think he's going to come out wild, swing bombs, clinch a little bit, see if he can get that takedown and sub. But if he can't get that takedown and sub, he's just going to try and knock you out on the feet. But we've seen, man, he's very, very wild. I don't think much of Lutz. I think he's complete trash. I hate his style. This boring. He just wants to take you down. He hasn't got much finishing equity. Just wants to lay on you. So I hate seeing that from fighters. So I'm not a big fan of him. So to be honest, I hope Pineda knocks him out or gets his submission first round. But in terms of betting, I'm not sure, man. I think I'd rather be on the Pineda side and hopes that he, gets that takedown. He does have excellent BJJ, man, especially from top. So if he can get that takedown, man, Lutz is in big trouble. So yeah, I think I'd rather play him over the late KO for the Lutz side.
Yeah, I think WW makes a fair point. He probably shouldn't be 3-1 over anybody. He's not super dynamic, not super, out ahead of anybody in any one category of MMA. So I tend to agree. He's just not a guy that I could be laying minus 300 on. It would probably be prop shopping for me or passing. As for the other side for Pineda, the cardio, the age, the last fight on the contract, those are the things I really don't like. That would make me just prefer to pass than play the underdog, but can't blame anybody for taking that underdog shot. The other thing is, if you wiki cap this fight, you're going to be like, wow, Pineda has all these losses by sub. Forget about him. They were like 10 years ago. I don't think the guy's been sub since 2010. So if he loses this fight inside the distance, I think he's getting knocked out. I don't think Tucker Lutz is like, going to come out here and blow us away with his BJJ on the ground. I think more often than not, even if he was on the ground with him, he would just posture up and mount and just try and throw ground and pound, get the finish. But that is my read on it. Next up, we are moving to the main card. So as we do, guys, 75 people rocking with us live. If you have not already, subscribe to the channel. We do this each and every week, breaking down the fight cards from bottom all the way up to the top. Very profitable so far this year. I just had a reverse sweep go against me. I still have a 20% ROI tracked on the year. So that's when you're doing something right. I like to think. Right back at it once again this week. And we are moving to the main card here. A lot of great fights on the main card. So make sure you get subscribed. Drop a like on this video. If you have not already, go follow my man at Just Win, baby. That's 2 T's. Don't forget the second T. That's 2 T's on Twitter, and do us all a big favor in that regard. Now we're moving to Albert Duraev taking on Chidi Njokuani, and both these guys be training in Las Vegas, but Chidi is a guy from Texas, so want to keep that in the back of our minds. That being said, we're dealing with a fight here where both these guys are 34 years of age. For me, that's favoring the unders. That's favoring the fight doesn't go the distance. I'm not confident in either one of these guys being able to push that full 15 minutes of cardio pace. I've seen both these guys slow down. Does that give me some concern that this turns into the two guys drunkenly hugging each other as the fight goes to decision? Minor, but I think more often than not, these guys are going to come out and somebody's going to get their game plan to work here. Chidi Njokuani, his game plan is going to be, I'm going to knock this guy's head off. Albert Duraev doesn't take damage great. 2 fights in the UFC, 2 absolutely swollen eyes. Everything looked disgusting about that in terms of how he receives damage. That being said, prior to getting his eye busted up by Kopylov, he was absolutely like kickboxing his face off. And then when he got his eye busted up, he took him down. He was able to ride him out. We've seen that Kopylov win aged great. Puna tried to replicate it, couldn't get a single takedown, couldn't sniff a top position on this guy. So for me, Duraev is a very skilled fighter, but he's a little suspect. So he's the kind of guy that I laid the minus 2XX, right? I think it was like minus 200 for a big amount, Rich, when he fought against Kopylov. And I was like I was shaking watching that fight. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I did this. But now it's at the point where, I saw that fight. I bet on Buckley. I got more money from this Duraev character, right? Because the first time I bet Kyle Bittencourt on the Contender Series, and that guy got folded up like a lawn chair in like 35 seconds. So I have eked my way back to profitability with Duraev. And I think this is the kind of time where it might be a bet on spot. It might be an undervalued spot because I think for Chidi to win this fight, I think more often than not, he's going to have to win it by knockout. Whereas I think that there's a path for Duraev to win this fight by knockout. He gets to the top position. He lands some big shots. He lands a big shot. He's 185-pounder. He throws with intention on the feet. He's pretty talented with his strikes. His offense has never been a problem. It's his defense on the feet. So he could land a big shot and knock Chidi out. So there's his path to a KO, his path to a sub. He's a much better grappler. I think Chidi's a good grappler. He's a black belt. But Duraev, talented on the ground, very skilled, can submit, I think, most high-level guys. And his pressure on the ground will break people and make them tired enough to submit. So I think that's something to look at. And then the decision equity. Who's more likely to just grind this fight out in a disgusting way that nobody wants to watch? I would again have to probably favor Duraev there. So I think Chidi's got real finishing equity, but his knockout line is like plus 125, which would put Duraev, in my view, slightly favored. I think that Duraev probably, incorrectly the underdog here, but biggest height and reach advantage on the card, Chidi Njokuani. So there's the credit to Chidi, local Texas fighter, with the biggest height and reach advantages on the card. But I think the height and reach is a disadvantage in this regard. Duraev's going to be right there for the hips. He's going to grab a hold of him, put him on the ground, pass to the mount, and he's probably going to finish. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, we're on the same side, man. Duraev sub. That's what I liked when I looked at this fight. I don't think Chidi's wins have aged well. Dusko looking like an absolute bum at the moment, the way his career's gone. And then before that, he, got a quick knockout on Barrios. And on his Dana White Contender Series fight against Souza, he just didn't have any ground game. So obviously he made Chidi look good. I remember betting on that fight. But here, I think Duraev can have his way, man. I think that Chidi isn't going to put up a fight like Kopylov did. I think he will for the first, takedown attempt. Maybe he stuffs that. But I think eventually in the first round, Duraev gets him down and, does his thing, man. Grinds him out, puts the pressure on him, and ultimately gets the submission. I know Chidi's a black belt, but I don't rate it that much. He's been subbed a handful of times. And from what I see on the ground, you wouldn't know he was a black belt, especially from his offense as well. We're on the same side. The only thing I didn't like about Duraev is I watched an interview this week, and he was talking about he wants to show his full range of martial arts. Which I
heard that too, and I was like, please God, that's a mistranslation, because they did wrap around the end of that quote, and they were like, but if the opportunity appears to wrestle, I will obviously do that. I was like, all right, because dude, my blood pressure was going up. I was like, why would you say that? Yeah, that's a great point though, because that's the kind of thing that'll make you cry in your coffee.
It's always the way in it. I don't know what's the matter with these fighters. Sometimes, they've got a path of least resistance, and they're there trying to be like, Floyd Mayweather or the best kickboxer in the world or whatever. Duraev's aside, he's dog money. So how can he not be a bet? It's a bet for me.
Yeah, I would have to agree there. Taking a look at that side, hoping more money comes in the other way. Because I kind of expect it will, especially at face-offs. I think there is going to be an apparent size difference between these two guys. And, honestly, the Russians have been getting screwed a little bit lately in the UFC. They haven't always been getting the nod. They've been getting kind of misdone on some of these cards and stuff. But I just think this is the kind of fight where Duraev can take it into his own hands. The training room stories are unbelievable about what the guy could do. But also, coming into the Contender Series, I had skepticism against Kyle Bittencourt because I was like, man, how is he going to enforce a grappling heavy game plan against this guy who I'm watching do black belt tournaments and look very, very sound on the ground? And he treated him like he was a rag doll and just did whatever he wanted to him on the ground. And I was like, oh my God, like this guy Duraev is talented. So I think that for me, it's that adjustment period over time. Buckley, he was too confident for that fight. He was too cocky. He was talking about coming in there, throwing hands on the feet and all this stuff. And the whole market was one way on Duraev. Now it's the opposite. Now the whole market's convinced Duraev, he's got nothing. He stinks. He's whatever. But again, two guys that have age parity here. Buckley was younger. Buckley is a little bit fresher in the game. And he got laid out by Chris Curtis, but he was doing well with the volume in that fight as well. So I just think when I look at this fight, I see somebody who's got a higher ceiling long-term in Duraev at plus money. That's something I have to pay attention to. Next up, we've got Alex Perez making his comeback here against Manel Kape. This is a really tricky fight, because you don't often see these fights from flyweights make it onto the main card. I think that's significant, right? I think that could signal these guys are potentially in title contention, right? And when I look at who the UFC wants to market, who they want to promote coming out of this fight, I would have to think it's Manel Kape because he is explosive in a lot of his wins. He talks a big game. He dresses the part. He does a lot of things that, the little my old wrestling coach used to say the little things that make a big difference, right? And I think Manel Kape has a lot of those things intangibly in the media that make him a more marketable fighter that the UFC wants to get behind. And he had some stumbles out of the gates, so they gave him a little bit softer competition, get his feet back underneath him. Because you got to understand, he went from wearing shoes and rising to, fighting on bare canvas surface against the best guys in the world. Just a little bit of an adjustment period. I think that Kape is a talented guy, trains with AKA, a gym that's produced a lot of champions. I think there's a lot to like on the Kape side. For Perez, the things that I don't like, all the fight cancellations, the lack of activity, the things that are going on outside the octagon, which it's all respect. He was like taking time off to be a father and all this stuff. You never get a bad word from me, but it's just Kape is all about this life. He's all in on this right now, right here. And he's thinking about the next fight, the world title opportunities, what he could get from this. And he's saying, boldly proclaiming, this will be a finish. This will be easy. I'm going to take this guy out. But he's not doing it in a way that sounds corny, that sounds braggadocious. He's like, no, this guy hasn't been focused. He hasn't been in the octagon. I have been. I've been working. I've been honing my skills. He thinks that he's like, I see this guy at the PI. He's getting a massage. He's like, if you think getting a massage is going to beat me, he's like, believe me, that's not going to happen. So I was like, I love this guy. I'm in love with this interview. I think that Kape is going to get the finish here. But I also think the fight doesn't go is very interesting to me here, because how does Perez win this fight? I think Perez wins this fight by coming out here, barnstorming this guy a little bit, getting on top of him, taking his back, and trying to finish him. Because I think that Kape, he's getting better in the jiu-jitsu. He's getting better at his scrambles, his transitions. But we've seen that in the past, that's where he's been exploited sometimes. I don't think that Perez has the skills necessarily to knock out Kape on the feet. I don't really see that. I think the defense on the Kape side is better defensively on the feet. I think that this is an interesting fight in the wrestling and grappling exchanges because Kape's so explosive. I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to hit some counter takedowns, maybe reverse some positions. I think Perez is going to make it interesting if he can extend the fight. But the other problem for me with Perez is that he's given up a couple of these, easy finishes to people where, that Davison Figueiredo fight, he basically just gave the fight away. The Pantoja fight, Pantoja is one of the most dangerous, dynamic guys in the division, but there's been other guys who've made him work for it, that have made him extend the fight. And he wasn't able to do that. He just kind of makes mental lapses on the ground that cost him fights. And he's the one who's constantly putting himself in those positions. So I think if you haven't been getting the repetitions and you already make some of these mistakes, the one thing I did like about his interview, I listened to both guys' interviews. He said, I've been working with my teammates this whole time for these last 2 years, every fight camp, every preparation. He's like, and I was still getting dinged up. So that's why I was having some injuries and whatever. I wanted to be more active. I wanted to fight more. But until I see it, it's very hard for me to support him. I bet him in his last fight because I thought he was going to be able to push the wrestling and the grappling and make it competitive. And he got absolutely steamrolled. And he said that, he said, it's the first time in my career I got completely steamrolled. One thing I noted in my research here, Alex Perez has never lost 3 consecutive fights in his career. He's had a 31 fight pro career. He's lost twice in a row on 2 occasions before this. So we have one streak that's got to come to an end here because either Perez is going to get that 3rd loss in a row for the first time in his career. Manel Kape has never rattled off 4 straight victories at the major promotional level. Not in Ryzen, he didn't do it. And this would be the first time in the UFC that he hit 4 straight victories. So something's got to give here. What is it going to be, Rich?
Well, I think that was a good point that you made, that this is on the main card. And for me, obviously, Kape is the side. So, why would you be putting Perez? I think he's on the downside of his career. Why put him on the main card against Kape? And to me, it's because they just want Kape to take his number. I think, why is it number 7 versus number 8 in the rankings? Number 7 versus number 9. So, I think Perez is on his way out, man. I think he's got a side business going. If you go and check out his Instagram, he says that these fights are being cancelled because he's getting knocks in the gym, training. I don't think that's completely true. I think that it's just textbook, isn't it? Somebody loses a title fight, which he did against Davison, and then they just fall off the deep end. Their confidence is lacking. They're just not the same fighter that they once were. Like, that's always a fade spot for me, is somebody who's just lost a title fight and then they're coming back in for their next fight just against, anyone. I think Perez is on his way out. He used to be a decent fighter. He had a good all-round game, some decent submissions, some KO power. And that's what got him the title shot. But I think he's on his way out the door, man. And although I don't like Manel Kape, I think he wins this one. I don't think he'll ever be champ. I think he's just lucky that he's fighting Alex Perez at the minute. In this fight, I'll take him in this fight. But I don't think his ceiling's very high. I don't like either guy, to be honest. Manel, he plays around too much. There's been fights where I've backed him and I've been like, for fuck's sake, man. Like, you've got 2 more rounds to go. Calm down. You're not even winning this. And that's what's cost him in fights, man. The one against Nicolau, I remember him thinking he got robbed, and so did half of Twitter. But I think it's his style of fighting, man. He leaves it open for the judges to fuck you over. But in this fight, I'll take Manel Kape, and I think he probably finishes Perez. Interesting, the submission line has come down. I think it opened 650. It's now 450 for Manel. So maybe that's a good look. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that, I've talked about this before. My theory on a lot of finishes is that they're pathological, where guys just have a certain way that they get finished, that they make the same mistakes over and over. Fighting is psychological. And when you're under a lot of stress, a lot of times you make the same mistake twice, right? And I know this personally because I used to lose the same wrestling match every couple Saturdays. I'd go to the tournament, I'd be up 5-2. I would end up losing 7-5. Like, I've done this personally, and I had to deconstruct it psychologically in order to improve. And so I know that for Alex Perez, his last couple fights and throughout his career, getting submitted is just like a safety blanket for him. When he's under duress, he makes a bad shot, he leaves his head out there, and then he tries to fight it, and then he gets submitted, and I think that those are the problems that I have. I think that Manel Kape, he might not be better at jiu-jitsu, but if he hurts him, he knows what the predictable reaction will be, which is that Perez will shoot, and then he can try and take his back and finish him. I think that when you look through his fights historically in Ryzen as well, Kape is more than capable of doing that. And when you listen to his training partners and his coaches like Daniel Cormier, they talk about the fact that his grappling is better than people understand it is. And I've seen him use Kimura sweep counters, things that are a little bit more high level. And it's a different thing to grapple with and without shoes. Again, I say from experience. So I think the more experience he gets in the UFC, the more likely it is that we'll see submission finishes from Manel Kape. I think this is an opponent that is liable to be submitted, which is a problem. And the last note that I'll leave you guys with here is Manel Kape has a finish win, I believe, over Ode Osborne in Texas. The last time he fought in Texas was able to get the win there. And Kape is 2 years younger. He's going to have the reach advantage here. And he has 3 times the social media following. I don't know exactly where Alex Perez is training. I would have to assume he's been doing some training in Vegas. But either way, man, not sold on the Alex Perez side until I see more from him. It's going to be hard to bet on him. Next up, we have a fascinating fight. And I don't often say that about WMMA on the main card or otherwise, but I actually believe that in this case because Andrea Lee, her problem has never been a lack of talent. It's been oftentimes a lack of consistency, a lack of full 15 minutes of putting it together. And on the other hand here, we have Maycee Barber, who she's gotten some beneficial scorecards and she's had a lot of close fights. Her skills have trailed her confidence, but confidence is a big thing. Physicality is a big thing. And she has an awkward build for the division, low center of gravity, strong. I think she can muscle a lot of girls around in the clinch. I think she wears out girls over the course of 15 minutes because one thing that's different than cardio is just when you're dealing with somebody who's really strong, you could have great cardio all you want, but that's exhausting. It feels different to move around with somebody who's extremely strong and powerful than somebody who's just average strength. So I think that we saw that borne out in the Viviane Arrucha fight, where Vivi above average strength for the division. So even though she's a little bit older, right, she was able to keep that kind of pace, that strength, that physicality. And Andrea Lee didn't like that, especially down the stretch. I think that the one thing about Maycee Barber that's always stood out is that she keeps a very good pace into that third round. She's normally winning the third round of these fights, even against talented fighters, even against the Alexa Grassos of the division. And the Miranda Maverick fight, that's a fight that I bet on her in that fight. I didn't know that she deserved the nod there necessarily, but I thought that Miranda Maverick, because of the skill gap on the ground, would have an easier time winning that fight. And it was much more competitive than I expected. So each time out, Maycee Barber has made me think, maybe she's a little bit better than I thought since the Modafferi fight. Now, this is a tricky spot, though, because Andrea Lee does have some things going for her from Texas, right? Things that you don't want to ignore. Looks the part, looks like somebody that the judges could get behind, right? Pretty smile and all this stuff. So I think that those are some concerns here if the fight gets extended. But I have a feeling that Maycee Barber is live to finish this fight, to get it done inside the distance, just because I haven't liked what I've seen from Lee in fights that get extended. But here's why I say this fight's fascinating. On the Lee side, the odds have never been this high for Andrea Lee, right? She's been a favorite in almost all of her UFC bouts, and she's 2-0 as an underdog so far. But when you look at the underdog opportunity she's had, she's like plus 110 on average both times. So she hasn't been a big dog and cashed. This is the first time she's been a big underdog in a UFC fight. And is that the odds maker saying, the ship has sailed on Andrea Lee? She's 34 years of age. She looks a little past it. Her cardio's not good. Or is that the market overreacting and saying, now she hasn't been serving her purpose for me as a small favorite in her recent bouts. So now she stinks and she's plus 220. It's a really difficult call for me to make. So my gut instinct is that Maycee Barber is going to win this fight via finish in round 3. But I also have a feeling that the line is a little bit wide here on the money line perspective. What do you think, Rich?
I think Barber's going to smash her up, man. I think she's going to win in the distance. I'm going to bet the submission at 1,100, I think. I think Barber's going to submit Lee. I think the market's got it right. I think Lee is on the decline as much as I like her. She's always been like a favorite fighter to watch for me. Andrea Lee, I like her style. She's pretty, the rest of it. But I think here she just hit a brick wall, man. Barber's too strong. The physicality, like you mentioned, Lee doesn't handle that well. And she's not going to handle it well here, man. She's going to do her boxing thing on the feet. I don't think she's going to try any takedowns, Lee. Not that I think that would serve her well anyway. I only think she'd end up getting reversed. I think Barber's coming into her own now. She took the first L against Roxy. She's only 24. She's an alpha male. You know, she's on the up, man, and Lee's on the decline. And I can definitely see a finish from Barber here. And that sub line's ridiculous for women's MMA, 1100. So yeah, I'm taking it, man. Barber finish in round 2 or 3 for me.
Yeah, the one thing that I don't love about a Barber sub, and I do think that there's probably value on the number, to be clear, but the only thing I don't like is she's so violent. She will bust a girl up. She's not like most women. I feel like if the sub presents itself, or they could go for the KO, they're not going to be even thinking about the KO. They're like, let me just take this easy sub. But I feel like Maycee Barber is like, let me get that wrist and just pound her until she's gone. She's just a violent woman. So that's the only downside there. I think the ITD is a good way to cover both. But yeah, I just prefer the Barber side. 10 years younger, way more physical. And Andrea Lee likes to work in the clinch. She likes to be a savvy operator from there. I think that that's not going to be a safety zone for her. I think that that's going to be a really difficult place. Nobody's bullied Maycee Barber in the clinch so far in her career that I can remember. What were you saying, Rich?
Yeah, I was going to say, you're probably right. ITD is safer, but that's why it's called betting, in it, and there's risk attached to it. But for 1100, I'll take that risk, man.
I feel that 100%. Next up, guys, we've got the featured bout of the evening. Nate the Train Landwehr taking on Austin Lights Out Lingo. This is another well-matched fight. You've got Nate Landwehr. He is the older party here, coming in at 34 years of age, taking on Austin Lingo. Was out last year, was dealing with some minor injuries. He said no surgeries, which I like to hear, but just rehabbing, getting himself back in shape. He said he wants to do 3 or 4 fights this year in his interview. Also love to hear that. For Nate the Train, he said, I wanted to fight Caceres. I want to get, an opportunity to break into this top 15. That's what he's looking to do. But at 34 years of age, basically he's got to get moving now, you would think, if he is going to get these winning ways going. For Austin Lingo, I think he's a live underdog here. And let me just make the case for why. The odds history sometimes tells a story with a fighter. Nate the Train Landwehr, he's closed as a favorite exactly one time in the UFC. And he's done very well as an underdog, right? He's been very profitable as an underdog. I will remind you guys, he did lose that fight that he closed as a favorite, his only opportunity to do so. So gets his second opportunity here as a closing line favorite. But when you've got 5 opportunities and you're an underdog in every one of them, that should tell you something about how the odds makers are looking at him. Now, what changed that he's a 70% favorite over a guy who's 9-1, right? Who's got no clear weaknesses as far as I'm concerned. I think that his cardio is maybe not stellar. So maybe that's where you would advantage Nate Landwehr, but I don't think that he's terrible at anything. I don't think he's a complete bum grappler. I don't think that, he's 2-0 career to the submission. He's been training for a long time with Fortis MMA, a bunch of other UFC quality fighters. So I just think that Austin Lingo, if you ask me, like, who's a generic 145er? That's Austin Lingo. He's just a very generic 145er. And so I think the average 145er in the UFC, based on the way that Nate Landwehr fights, is probably value at plus 200 against Nate Landwehr because he puts himself on the line. Herbert Burns, who would you favor Herbert Burns against in this division? Probably nobody. He has a win by knockout in round 1 over this guy, where he had a submission attempt and a knockout all within one exchange. Short notice fight, I understand. Then he has a split decision worthy fight with Darren Elkins, who's on the back 9 of his career. Then he goes out there, gets flatlined again by Julian Erosa. It's like a guy that's a 500 fighter in the UFC long-term at best. I said insert generic 500, UFC featherweight. That's kind of what I think we're getting with Lingo here, but he's got the upside of youth, and he's got some finishing equity that he showed earlier in his career. Has not been very good in terms of putting together finishes in the UFC, but this is probably the most finishable opponent that he's had so far. Yusuf Zalal, say a lot of things about the guy, but Yusuf Zalal is pretty hard to put away, right? That was his UFC debut. He didn't look so great there. Nate Landwehr didn't look so great in his UFC debut. We throw those out, then you see that he's been a profitable betting commodity. I bet in both of his last 2 fights, Austin Lingo was probably not as big a favorite as he should have been against Jacob Kilburn, who wasn't a UFC quality guy. And then you look at, his last fight out, plus 100 against Saldana, and he was able to get the win there as well. So now you give me Austin Lingo as an underdog once again. He's 1-0 as an underdog, and Nate Landwehr's 0-1 as a favorite. I'm not trying to do reductionist analysis, but you put all that together with the fact that Nate fights with his chin up in the air and almost got flattened by Onama in the first round, got sat to his back, was in the full mount in that round. So I think that for me, there's just a lot of red flags on the Nate side here, but he's fun as hell. So I like this fight not to go the distance. I think somebody's getting finished here. More often than not, I don't think Nate Landwehr would have it any other way. He said he's going to be intentional about going out there and getting the finish, but I also think he leaves himself there to be hit. I think he's there to be finished, and I wouldn't be surprised with a guy who's throwing like Austin Lingo, who's trying to get people out of there in the first round. Historically, I wouldn't be surprised if he was able to do so. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, I really didn't want to bet this fight at all. I wanted to stay away. But then they opened Lingo, plus 230, something stupid like that. I think he's down to plus 175 now. So yeah, my hand was forced, man. I think anybody with a puncher's chance is at this kind of dog money is good against Nate. I think his chin is that bad, and I think that's why the market reacts how it does over Nate. Is because that chin is always there to be checked, man. And Lingo can do that. He doesn't have the wrestling, the grappling Lingo, but he doesn't need it here. He just needs, a good right hand to connect, and it's light out for Nate. Obviously, I do like Nate. He's a character. I want him to win. He's obviously going to try and grapple here, mix it up. But even when I had him in the Anama fight as the underdog, I was worried. It got to round 3, and he was just he had like fucking full mount on him. And he was standing back up, wanting to trade. And I was just cringing the whole time, thinking, when's this fight going to end, man? Because I was just nervous as hell. So, I'm taking Lingo as the underdog. I don't think it takes much to put Nate out. I think his chin is that dodgy. And I might even take a look at Lingo round 1 and 2 for the KO as well. I might add to that. Dog or pass opportunity, man.
I love it. And as we are going to the co-main event, guys, I will give away 4 looks where you have a social media A side who is a underdog on this card. There are 4 that fit that category, and I'm happy to share them with you if we get to 100 live viewers. So tell a friend, hit retweet on my link, and let's get this thing rolling before we get to the main event. But we've got a co-main event that's not worth as much time, effort, or attention. We've got Holly Holm taking on Yana Santos, and I did some deep diving into the numbers here. For Holly Holm, it's basically been pretty binary over the course of her career. Every fight that was favored not to go to decision has not gone to decision. It's happened 4 times in her career in 13 UFC fights. She's 7-6 in the UFC, guys. So for me, that's a huge problem looking at a minus 240 favorite that's 41 years old, that's 7-6 in the company. She's a 500 fighter. It's like that's going to be tough for me always. But the thing is, when you look at Holly Holm, if you've been betting her as a favorite, you've been profitable by about 1%, right? She's turned a very meager profit. She's just outperformed expectations as a favorite. But if you look at her as an underdog, bolstered by that Ronda Rousey performance, she's, just absolutely soared in terms of her underdog ROI. So Holm is an underdog. I always understand that bet. But, in her last fight, I did not understand why people were coming in so heavily and so convicted against Ketlen Vieira. I, got a lot of grief for celebrating that win. I had a huge position on Ketlen Vieira that night, which admittedly was a little risky. But I'll tell you guys what. Who was closer to finishing that fight at any point? I thought that Holm was wearing the worst damage on her face. I thought she visibly looked swollen. I thought she had gotten hit and hurt by a lot of the shots. And on top of that, she almost got her head popped off like a pimple at one point. Her damn face turned purple. So as far as I was concerned, that's a clean Ketlen Vieira win. But Yana Santos, basically eked the closest fight ever out against Ketlen Vieira in a fight where she was largely dominated in the grappling, in the wrestling. But Ketlen Vieira, as she often does just too little, right? She just doesn't throw enough. She doesn't do enough with good positions. I think Yana is too passive. She gives up a lot of positions. She lets people push her against the fence. My only bold take on this fight would be that I actually think Holm by sub is live here because I don't rate Yana on the ground. I do think that Holm pursues takedowns pretty aggressively at this stage in her career. She doesn't do much else, right? So it's like she pushes you against the fence and she tries to take you down. And I think against taller opponents that like to engage in the clinch, she actually has a better chance to do that. You look at Yana's losses, almost all of them are ITD. So if this fight was favored to end ITD, I would just be hammering Holm, But the thing that scares me is I could definitely see this being a greasy decision that goes either way. We know that Yana can grease out those close decisions. We talked about the optics with a bunch of other blondie, smiley girls getting the win. This is Holly Holm, who's from Albuquerque, New Mexico, right? Not from Texas. And she's taking on a girl who's a little bit younger, who's with Thiago Santos and all the she's just another known commodity in the UFC. So the A side for sure is Holly Holm, but at 41 years of age, did get a new contract. That's something favorable. That's definitely something favorable for Holly Holm here. But I don't really feel compelled to bet on this fight, is what I'd say at the odds. I do think Holm's going to get this done, though. I think she's the side. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, I think Holm wins all day. I think if she was 51, she'd still win this fight against Yana. I don't like Yana's game. I don't like her game before she was like having a baby, and now she's coming back, like someone said in the chat, post-pregnancy. That's an auto fade for me. That's a massive red flag. But then you add to that like her game prior. I just don't like it, man. She needs them takedowns, to get her game going. I don't think she'd find them on Holly anyway at the best of times. I think Holly has still got it. She shocked me in that Vera fight. I bet Vera, and Vera lost that shit, man. We was lucky to catch that. So, yeah, she just really shocked me.
Fundamental disagreement, but continue.
Yeah, I think Holly's still got it. I think she should win a decision against this girl, stay on the outside, outpoint her. If she gets a finish along the way, then very good. But I'm staying away. I don't really like betting people over -200, so I'm staying away. But yeah, Holly should win this for me, man. Maybe a parlay piece for somebody, put it in a double with something. I don't know.
Maybe Holm will come down under -200. I do think that there could be some love for Santos. People that just bet into the age gaps in MMA. I think that the age gaps are so much less predictive in WMMA. So I think that's something that the market could overcorrect for this week. Especially a lot of people don't like the age on Holly Holm. I've seen it all over Twitter. And so this is the kind of fight where I like to be going against the public sentiment. And last time out, it was Holly Holm's going to get this free win. So I had to go with Vera and stop Brazilian hate. But this time, I think that we might be able to get a USA chant going. Maybe we get Holly Holm across the distance, that way with the fans being more favorable. I remember Andrei Arlovski clearly losing to Jay Collier, but the fans liking him more, pushed him over the finish line. That's all you need sometimes. So I think Holm is definitely the biggest star on this card by social media metrics, by a few things. So definitely the most well-known fighter, in terms of public perception. So all those things point me to the Holly Holm side. Yes, continue.
If people are putting stock into Holly's age, that she's 41 and that's a fade for them, then that's stupid. She's just been given a new contract. She doesn't look like she's lost a step when you watch her last few fights. She's clearly on steroids or has been on them very recently.
She's from Jackson Wink. I mean,
yeah. So she's still got it, man. She's still very, very capable of beating someone like Yana. I'm not saying she's going to touch the belt again. She's not. But she can certainly win this fight, regardless of her being 41 or not. So if you're fading her based on her age solely, then don't.
Could not agree more. And there we have it. We are on to the main event, folks. 135 pounds, a hell of a damn fight, because we've got two guys that are trying to make their stamp as elite bantamweight contenders, one of the most crowded divisions in the UFC. And you've got on the one hand, Cory Sandman Sandhagen. He's done a lot of headlining for the UFC lately, fought a lot of tough guys, only losses coming to UFC champions inside the organization. That's Aljamain Sterling, TJ Dillashaw in a pretty questionable decision, but admittedly just a little bit of inactivity from Cory Sandhagen ended up costing him there. Also think he slowed down a bit down the stretch in that fight. I thought he almost submitted TJ though, so very compelling stuff. And then the Aljamain Sterling fight, we all know how that went. About as quick as it could go for an elite contest. This is a fascinating fight because Marlon Chito Vera on the other side, he's got a lot of momentum. He's done very well against UFC champions. His only loss coming via unanimous decision against Jose Aldo Jr. And that fight was basically like a lapse in judgment from Chito. He got his back taken, and we know what the MMA meta is at this point. You know, if you take somebody's back, you lock in that body triangle, you can basically kiss the round goodbye, especially if it's at the 4-minute mark. And so Chito Vera has never been more angry in his life, just sitting there like contemplating life decisions like, damn, I'm stuck in this body triangle. I lost this fight. Damn. Because in round 2, I, as a Jose Aldo bettor, am sitting there going, oh, Jose Aldo's about to get knocked out. That's beautiful. I love when that happens. And then he comes out and guts it out in round 3. Back take, rides it out like a donkey. These 5-round fights are a different ballgame when you're fighting somebody like Chito. I truly believe that, because when you have somebody who wants to take some time to develop what they're doing offensively, to land big shots, to find big opportunities, the more time, the better. I think that for Cory Sandhagen, a lot of his finishes in the UFC have come from guys gassing. You know, not all of them. Obviously, he intercepted Frankie Edgar in beautiful fashion with the flying knee. Marlon Moraes, I think, was obviously a little bit washed at that stage of his career, but he hit him with a spinning kick that broke his orbital. Like, that's just that's beautiful work. So he's a very dangerous guy, especially if he gets you sitting still. You know, he can be very dangerous. But I think Marlon Chito Vera keeps a pretty solid guard. I think he's insanely durable. Right, the guy has a 12-0 knockdown ratio so far in the UFC. That's just unbelievable, right? It's almost unheard of for a guy who started his career in the organization at 21, right? So he starts his career at 21. He's kind of like Max Holloway in a way, where he starts off at a very young age. He grows up in front of you. He's lost before, right? He's been dominated before, let's say, by Davey Grant back in the day. But now you see he's a much more difficult fighter to get a huge advantage on. You know, I looked, he's got a lot of finishes in the first and second round. So the narrative that this guy, I think 8 in the UFC. So granted, is it against the highest level of competition? No, but they knew they needed to foster this guy's development. They were like, we've got a skilled guy here. He works really hard. He's talented, but maybe he's not ready for the top guys in the division because we plucked him out of here with less than 10 pro fights. To come in and be something. Now he's been training in the States for a long time. I think he's a very talented and skilled guy. I can't bet against him here. As an underdog, I think that Chito Vera gets the job done. I don't know how yet. That's the thing that's a little bit tricky for me, because I don't think it's going to be easy to knock out Cory Sandhagen. I do think Sandhagen has been wearing damage poorly over his recent performances. I thought this is a Song Yadong fight. I bet him there. I bet him by knockout. I was very worried in that fight. I thought he was getting hurt. I thought he was getting rocked in round 2. I thought he got rocked way backwards across the octagon, needed to cover up. And I thought Song didn't push the issue. I think he was a little bit worried about gassing over 5 rounds if he pushed the action. So Song kind of held back there. I don't think we'll see that from Chito. I think one of the things that's always stood out to me is when Chito gets somebody hurt, he's got very good finishing instincts. He's got a good way of attacking, and forcing the issue. So I think that in this fight, both guys are going to look at various points to implement their wrestling, implement their grappling. I think either one of these guys could find the win by sub. You look at who Cory's been training with. He's been training with Ryan Hall. He's been training with high-level wrestlers and grapplers as well. So I think that's a little bit of a tell from Cory, what he's going to try and do here. He's going to come out here and try and wrestle and try and grapple, maybe try and emulate some of that Jose Aldo performance, look for the back takes, look for ways to control rounds and minutes. But I also think that Chito Vera on the other side, I think he's the more opportunistic finisher. I think he's a little bit more dangerous with his submission threats. I think that when you look at Cory Sandhagen historically, he's gotten out of some really precarious positions where he was nearly finished against Petr Yan, against Song Yadong, like I mentioned. He also got his back taken by Song Yadong in the opening 2 minutes of that fight. He got his back taken in the opening minute by Aljamain Sterling. So when you pressure this guy, when you really get in his face and audit him moving backwards, he can make mistakes, and he can put himself in positions where he gets audited against the fence for long stretches at a time and just doesn't have the requisite level of intensity to get off the fence. Because the thing that drove me nuts in that TJ Dillashaw fight is every time they're out in the open, he looked better. When they're engaging in extended scrambles, he looks more dangerous. But then he just got so many times in that fight, he was forced to a static position. And that tells me something here, where I think that if Chito is able to get into dynamic offensive positions, I think he's the more likely guy to finish. And I think he's got better durability. So in a very close fight, in a fight that I think both guys have real reasons that they could win this, Sandhagen's longer. He's got better volume, right? He's probably got better decision optics long-term. All those things are true. But I just think betting against somebody like Chito, when he's a plus 145 underdog, when he's an elite fighter, when he's turned an insane ROI overall, public perception's always been way too low on this guy. And as an underdog, it's been insanely low. He's 4-4 as an underdog for a 30+% ROI. It's hard to ignore, right? A lot of guys aren't turning that kind of number. And now you're giving me, 40% indication on the guy in a tightly contested bantamweight fight. I think it's a Chito Vera situation, but I say so reluctantly because it looks like he's a pretty public side this week. What do you think, Rich?
It's funny, man. You've got all that information, and I've basically got nothing. I'm still undecided, man. Obviously, it's hard to fade 5-round Vera as an underdog. So I don't know what I'm going with yet. I'm leaning towards Vera's going to sub him, or I really think Sandhagen could KO Vera. I know Vera hasn't been KO'd, and he shows great durability. But I don't think being KO'd is like out of the realm of possibility. So yeah, that's what I'm leaning with so far. I'm not sure what side I'm going to go with. I think weigh-ins and face-offs are going to be very telling, not just for this fight, but for most of the fights on the card. I want to see how people size up. I want to see what Pineda looks like. I want to see how big a Chidi is to Duraev and stuff like that. So, yeah, I will have a bet on the main. I'm just not sure yet which way I'm going to go. But I'll definitely be having a bet on this. Just need to see what opens up during the week, man.
I like it. And there's nothing wrong with waiting for more information. It's a lesson that I try and impart every week on this show. Yeah, sometimes you might miss the line by 5-10 cents that you were looking for. But if it comes at the cost of knowing like the other guy didn't make weight or the other guy looked terrible or like all these kind of things that we could get more information as fight week progresses, something that you want to be taking advantage of when you can, when appropriate. I think this is a perfect example for this main event. The line's been pretty steady and consistent, right? It hasn't been moving huge amounts in either direction. It's been about minus 155 at the lower end for Cory Sandhagen. It's been about minus 175, minus 180 at the upper end of that range. And then for Chito, it's been about plus 125 to plus 150, right? So pretty static range, pretty consistent range for this fight. I don't think that's going to change too much between now and fight time. So take the time, get some information, and then make your informed decision right before fight time. We did not get 100 viewers live. We were just there. We were at 93. So what we're going to do instead is I will just let you guys know one social media A-side who is an underdog in this fight, and that's Albert Duraev. One of the biggest gaps in social media on the card as well. Duraev, like 300,000 followers. So maybe in the U.S. we don't pay attention to Duraev every day and we don't care about his stuff, but I do think that he represents stardom for another part of the world. And so I think that's something they take into account here, when you're looking to fade him as an underdog this weekend. So guys, thank you all very much for your support. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for watching the show. If you haven't already, drop a like on this video. Make sure that you're subscribed to the channel so you see this show each and every week. Turn on those notifications so you never miss a video. Rich, please tell the people where they can find you, brother.
Yeah, Twitter, just win baby. Check out the link in my bio for the Patreon to receive all my bets. And if you want my best bet this week, it is Manel Torres to get it done.
I like it. There we have it. For me, if I had to go with a best bet right now, let me go with let's go with Alex Perez and Manel Kape. Fight doesn't go to decision. I think that one way or another, those boys are going to get after it. The flyweights find a way to get it done inside the distance somehow, some way. So that's what I'm going with. But guys, peace, love, and chicken grease. God bless you all. Enjoy those fights. Until next time, we'll see you on the flip. Good luck with all your bets. And make sure you drop a comment below what your favorite bet is. Let us know. And we'll get back to you. Thanks, guys. Take care, everybody.